The moment I walked through those mahogany courtroom doors in my Department of Defense credentials, the silence was deafening. In the gallery, I spotted my son Marcus and my daughter-in-law Jennifer. They were sitting behind my brother Daniel's legal team, expensive suits and leather briefcases creating a wall of privilege. Marcus caught my eye and actually laughed, that cruel, dismissive laugh I'd heard too many times over the past 15 years. I knew exactly what he was thinking. Mom's playing dress-up again in her little government costume. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't just some random witness. I was the architect of the investigation that was about to destroy everything they'd built on lies. And the woman they'd called useless for the past decade and a half, I was about to show them exactly how much I was worth. You see, my son had just made the biggest mistake of his life. At last week's family dinner, while mocking my boring government job, he'd accidentally confessed to details only someone involved in his uncle's crimes would know. He didn't realize his useless mother had an eidetic memory and 30 years of experience catching exactly this kind of slip. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back 10 days to the moment everything changed. The text message arrived at 4:30 on a Tuesday afternoon. "Family dinner tonight, Mom, 7 p.m. Don't be late." No, please. No, are you free? Just the command, delivered with the casual authority Marcus had perfected over the years. The same tone he used with his personal assistant, his housekeeper, his Instacart delivery person. The tone that said, "You exist to serve my schedule." I stared at the message on my phone. The same phone I'd had for 4 years, screen cracked in the upper left corner, a spiderweb fracture I'd learned to see through. Marcus had offered to buy me a new one last Christmas. Well, offered is generous. He'd sighed loudly when Jennifer pointed out my ancient device and said maybe I should upgrade if I could afford it on my government salary. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Probably you can't. The drive from my office in Virginia to Marcus's house in McLean took 40 minutes in evening traffic. I sat in my 2012 Honda Civic, the one Marcus called a vintage embarrassment, and watched BMWs and Teslas slide past me like I was standing still. The radio had stopped working 2 years ago. I drove in silence, which I'd come to prefer anyway. Silence meant I could think. Silence meant I could prepare. Marcus's neighborhood was the kind of place where the mailboxes cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. Tall gates, circular driveways, houses that didn't just have rooms, they had wings. His property sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, a modern masterpiece of glass and steel that Jennifer loved to feature on her social media. #BlessedLife, #LivingMyBestLife, #modern luxury. I pulled up to the gate and pressed the intercom button. Jennifer's voice crackled through, saccharine sweet. "Oh, Margaret, you're early. We're still setting up for Daniel's celebration. The hired staff is using the back entrance." I looked at my watch. 6:55, 5 minutes early. "I'm your mother-in-law, Jennifer, not the staff." A pause, then, "Of course, I just meant, well, you know how Marcus feels about punctuality. Come in, I suppose." The gate swung open with an expensive whisper. I parked my Civic next to 3 Teslas and a Mercedes G-Wagon, my car looking like a beggar at a wedding. As I walked to the front door, I caught my reflection in one of the floor-to-ceiling windows. 58 years old. Gray hair pulled back in a simple bun. Cardigan from Target, 3 years old, pilling at the elbows. Slacks from a discount store. Shoes that had seen better days. I looked exactly like what my family believed I was. A woman who'd settled for less and aged into irrelevance. Jennifer opened the door before I could knock. She was wearing something white and flowing that probably cost more than my monthly salary, her blonde hair perfect, her smile sharp. "Margaret, how quaint. You really should let me take you shopping sometime. I know some wonderful consignment shops that cater to women on fixed incomes." I stepped inside without responding. The house smelled like catered food and expensive wine. Voices echoed from the great room, laughter, the clink of glasses, the sound of people celebrating something. In the great room, Marcus and Daniel stood by the bar, champagne flutes in hand, faces flushed with victory. The celebration was already in full swing. 20 or so people milled about, other tech entrepreneurs, investors, the kind of people who measured success in millions and viewed the rest of humanity as supporting cast. Daniel spotted me first. "Maggie, you actually came. I told Marcus you'd probably bail. You know, work emergency. Or whatever it is you do all day in that office." 55 years old, my baby brother. Still handsome in that effortless way some men are, silver at his temples, expensive watch catching the light. He'd always been the golden child, the risk-taker, the visionary. While I'd been studying cryptography at MIT, he'd been dropping out of community college to start his first business. It had failed spectacularly, as had the next 5, but failure never stuck to Daniel the way it would have stuck to me. When Daniel failed, it was called learning. When I played it safe, it was called cowardice. Marcus came over, kissed my cheek with the warmth of someone greeting a distant acquaintance. "Mom, glad you could make it. Can I get you something to drink? We have wine, champagne, or I think there might be some beer in the back fridge if you prefer something simpler." "Water's fine." He gestured vaguely toward the kitchen. "Help yourself. Jennifer's got the staff handling the important drinks." I walked to the kitchen, poured myself water from the tap, not the filtered pitcher in the refrigerator, I knew better, and stood by the counter, watching the party through the doorway. This was my place in my son's home, the periphery, the edge, the spot where you stand when you're invited out of obligation rather than desire. Jennifer glided past with a tray of hors d'oeuvres, pausing just long enough to stage whisper, "Oh, Margaret, you're still doing that little job? At your age, most women retire to enjoy grandchildren. Oh, wait." She stopped, eyes wide with manufactured concern. "I forgot we decided not to have children yet. Too much disruption to my brand." The knife twisted, as she'd intended. Marcus and Jennifer had been married for 7 years. For the first 3, I'd hoped. For the next 2, I'd asked. For the last 2, I'd stopped bringing it up. The message was clear. I would not be a grandmother. My legacy ended with a son who found my very existence inconvenient. Dinner was served at a table that could seat 20. I was placed at the far end, next to a hedge fund manager's wife who spent the entire first course telling me about her vacation home in Aspen. I nodded and smiled and ate overpriced food that tasted like ambition. Daniel sat at the head of the table like a king, Marcus to his right, Jennifer to his left. The seating arrangement was a hierarchy made visible, and I was at the bottom. "So," Daniel announced, raising his glass, "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. As most of you know, I've been dealing with let's call it a misunderstanding with federal authorities. Some people at the Bureau who don't understand how technology works in the modern world." Polite laughter rippled around the table. "But I'm happy to report that my legal team has things well in hand. The case is falling apart. Turns out when you build your entire investigation on the testimony of low-level government bureaucrats who barely understand email, you don't have much of a case." More laughter. I took a sip of water. Marcus leaned forward, grinning. "Uncle Daniel, tell them about the investigator, the one who thinks she's some kind of expert." Daniel's smile widened. "Oh, that's the best part. The lead investigator on my case. Some woman named Foster, no relation to present company, thank God, who's apparently spent her entire career in some basement office pushing papers. My lawyers are going to tear her apart. She's never even testified in a major case before. This is her big moment, and she's going to get humiliated on the stand." My hand tightened around my water glass. Foster. He'd said my last name without even recognizing it, without making the connection. Because in Daniel's mind, I was Margaret who did something with computers, not Margaret Foster, senior strategic intelligence analyst. I existed in his world as a footnote, not a full person. The funny thing, Daniel continued, is that she actually tried to warn me. Can you believe that? Sent some anonymous message through a lawyer telling me to cooperate. Like I'm going to take advice from someone making $50,000 a year. Marcus laughed. That's almost as bad as Mom. Remember when she tried to give me financial advice? Told me not to invest with Uncle Daniel because it was too risky. I'd be broke if I'd listened to her. Jennifer chimed in. Well, Margaret does work in something technical, right? Maybe she's used to playing it safe. You know, the kind of person who's too afraid to dream big. The table had mostly stopped paying attention to me, which was normal. I was set decoration, wallpaper, the weird relative everyone tolerates at holidays. But then Daniel said something that made my blood freeze. The real joke is this Foster woman, the investigator, she thinks she's so smart. But we've got copies of all the server logs she's relying on. We know exactly what she knows. And we know she's wrong about the Dubai transfer dates. She has us moving money on the 19th, but we were actually in Singapore that week. Easy alibi. We've got hotel records, restaurant receipts, everything. Marcus nodded. Plus the shell company she thinks we used. That one was already dissolved before any of this started. She's chasing ghosts. My heart was pounding now. Server logs, Dubai transfer dates, Singapore alibi, shell company dissolution. They were talking about my investigation. The classified investigation. The one that even my own team only knew pieces of. And they knew specific details, dates, locations, technical specifics that we'd never released publicly. Details that only the suspects would know. Details that only someone on the inside would know. I looked up from my plate and caught Daniel's eye. He was grinning, flushed with wine and confidence, convinced of his own invincibility. Marcus was laughing at something Jennifer whispered in his ear. Neither of them noticed me at all. After dinner, the party moved back to the great room. I stood by the window, looking out at the manicured lawn, the pool with its underwater lights, the pool house that was bigger than my entire home. My reflection stared back at me, a ghost in this world of chrome and glass. Mom. I turned. Marcus stood behind me, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. You okay? You've been quiet. I'm always quiet at these things. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable. For a moment, just a flash, I saw the boy he used to be. The child who'd crawled into my lap after nightmares. The teenager who'd asked for help with calculus homework. The young man who'd hugged me at his college graduation and whispered thank you. That person was gone, or buried, or maybe he'd never existed outside my own desperate hopes. Listen, he said, I know these dinners aren't really your scene. Jennifer and I appreciate you coming, but you don't have to stay the whole time. I know you've got work tomorrow. Translation, you can leave now. You've fulfilled your obligation. Marcus, can I ask you something? He glanced toward the party, already mentally checked out. Sure. Are you happy? The question seemed to catch him off guard. What kind of question is that? A simple one. Are you happy with your life, with your choices? His jaw tightened. Mom, I'm extremely successful. I have everything I ever wanted. So yes, I'm happy. Why wouldn't I be? Because everything built on a lie eventually collapses. His eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt a grief so profound it was almost physical. This was my son, the baby I'd held in the delivery room, the child I'd sacrificed my doctoral studies for, the young man I'd worked double shifts to put through college. And he was standing here in his $4 million house, complicit in crimes against his own country, looking at me like I was an irritation to be managed. It means be careful, Marcus. The choices you make now will define who you become, and some choices can't be unmade. He laughed, but it was hollow. God, Mom, always so dramatic. I'm fine. Uncle Daniel's fine. Everything's fine. Maybe you should focus on your own life instead of worrying about mine. He walked away before I could respond. I left 20 minutes later. No one noticed. I retrieved my coat from the closet myself, let myself out the front door, walked to my car alone. As I drove down the winding driveway, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw the house blazing with light, heard the music and laughter spilling into the night. They probably didn't even realize I was gone. The drive home took me through neighborhoods that grew progressively less wealthy. McMansions gave way to townhouses to modest single-family homes, until I finally reached my street in Arlington. Small houses, old trees, cars that had seen better years. My neighborhood was the kind of place people like Marcus drove through without seeing. My house was dark when I pulled up. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, kitchen with appliances from the 90s. The lawn needed mowing. The paint was peeling. To anyone looking from the outside, it was the home of someone who'd never quite made it. Someone who'd settled for less and called it enough. I unlocked the door and stepped into the quiet. No music, no laughter, no celebration, just silence and the hum of the refrigerator. I poured myself a glass of water, tap, not filtered, and sat at my kitchen table. The same table James and I had bought at a yard sale 28 years ago. The same table where we'd done taxes and eaten breakfast and had 1,000 small moments that added up to a life. James had been gone for 8 years now. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, diagnosed too late to do anything but watch him fade. He'd died in our bedroom upstairs, holding my hand, telling me to be strong. The last thing he'd said to me, the very last words, "Don't let them make you small, Maggie. You're not small." After his death, I'd sold our bigger house in the suburbs, the one we'd raised Marcus in. The one with the mortgage I couldn't afford alone. I downsized here to this modest place and pocketed the difference. Everyone thought I'd done it because I had no choice. Poor Maggie can't afford the real house, has to move to the cheap neighborhood. They didn't know about the $1.2 million life insurance policy James had left me. They didn't know I'd taken that money, along with the $630,000 profit from selling the house, and invested it carefully, slowly, invisibly. They didn't know that over 8 years, through careful planning and smart decisions, I'd turned that $1.8 million into more than $5 million. They didn't know because James had made me promise not to tell them. In the hospital, 3 days before he died, he'd gripped my hand with what little strength he had left and said, "Maggie, listen to me. Don't ever tell Daniel or Marcus about the insurance money. They'll come after it. They'll pressure you, guilt you, manipulate you. Live simply. Stay invisible. Keep your money safe. Promise me." I'd promised. And for 8 years, I'd kept that promise. I drove an old car, wore old clothes, lived in a small house. I let my family believe I was barely scraping by. I let them pity me. Sometimes I let them mock me. Because being invisible had its advantages. Invisible people hear things, see things, learn things. Invisible people are underestimated. And there is tremendous power in being underestimated. I opened my laptop, also old, also slow, also perfectly functional for what I needed, and logged into my work email through the secure connection. 47 new messages since I'd left the office 3 hours ago. Most were routine, status updates, meeting requests, bureaucratic noise. But one email made me pause. Subject: Phantom Protocol Urgent Development. Sender: General Bradley Chen, Deputy Director, Defense Intelligence Agency. I opened it. Margaret, we've intercepted new communications suggesting the suspects are planning an exit strategy. Timeline appears to be within the next 10 to 14 days. We need to accelerate. Meeting tomorrow, 0600 SCIF Alpha. Come prepared to brief on prosecution readiness. I sat back, processing. Exit strategy meant they were planning to run, which meant they knew we were close, which meant we had a leak somewhere in the investigation. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Thanks for coming tonight, Mom. Sorry if things got a little loud. You know how Uncle Daniel gets when he's celebrating. I stared at the message. How many times had I gotten texts like this over the years? Casual dismissals wrapped in superficial politeness. Thanks for coming to the thing where we ignored you. Sorry we made you feel worthless, but that's just how things are. I typed back. Of course, I'm glad Daniel has things under control. 3 dots appeared. Then, yeah, his lawyers are the best. This whole thing will be over soon. I set the phone down and looked around my kitchen. The old table, the scratched linoleum, the refrigerator with a broken ice maker. To Marcus, this kitchen represented failure, a life half-lived, a cautionary tale. To me, it represented freedom. Because I didn't owe anyone anything. I didn't have a mortgage. I didn't have car payments. I didn't have debt of any kind. Every dollar I earned went where I decided it went. And nobody, not Marcus, not Daniel, not anyone, had any claim on my choices. I'd spent 30 years being invisible to my family. Tomorrow morning, I would walk into the most secure facility in the Department of Defense and brief, a room full of generals and intelligence directors, on an investigation that could reshape national security policy. But tonight, in my small kitchen, eating leftover soup from a can, I was just Mom. Poor Mom. Sad Mom. The one who'd never amounted to much. I finished my soup, washed the bowl, and went upstairs to the bedroom I'd slept in alone for 8 years. On my nightstand was a framed photo of James. His smile. His kind eyes. The man who'd seen me when everyone else looked past. I picked up the photo, traced the outline of his face with my finger. They have no idea, James, about any of it. They think I'm nothing. In my imagination, I heard his reply, the one he'd given me 1,000 times. Let them think it, Maggie. Let them underestimate you. And when the moment comes, show them exactly who you are. I set the photo down and looked at my reflection in the darkened window. 58 years old. Gray hair. Tired eyes, a face that had learned to fade into backgrounds. But behind that face was a mind that had cracked codes, dismantled terror networks, and outsmarted some of the most dangerous people on Earth. Behind that face was 3 decades of experience that had taught me one fundamental truth. The most dangerous weapon in the world isn't a bomb or a gun. It's information. And I had information my family couldn't even imagine. I set my alarm for 4:30 in the morning, climbed into bed, and fell asleep within minutes. Because tomorrow was going to be a very long day. And I needed to be ready. The alarm woke me in darkness. I showered, dressed in my usual work clothes, slacks, blouse, sensible shoes, and was on the road by 5. The drive to the DIA facility took 30 minutes at that hour, streets empty, the world still asleep. I stopped at a gas station for coffee, regular, black, in a paper cup, and listened to the news on the old radio. The commercial stations were playing the same songs they'd played for the past decade. The news stations were covering the same scandals. Nothing ever really changed, except that it did. Slowly, invisibly, until one day you woke up and the entire world was different. The DIA facility didn't look like much from the outside. A nondescript building in an office park, the kind of place that could house accountants or insurance adjusters. But the parking lot had barriers. The entrances had checkpoints, and the real facility was 3 floors underground, encased in steel and concrete, invisible to satellites and curiosity. I swiped my badge at the first checkpoint. The guard, someone who worked the early shift, had 3 kids, nodded. "Morning, Ms. Foster." "Morning. How's your daughter doing? The one applying to colleges?" His face brightened. "Got accepted to Virginia Tech. Engineering program. We're so proud." "You should be. She's brilliant." I moved through 3 more checkpoints, each one stripping away another layer of the normal world. Phone into a locker. Laptop into another locker. Even my watch, because it had wireless capability. By the time I reached SCIF Alpha, I was carrying nothing but my credentials and my mind. The conference room was already filling up. General Chen at the head of the table, his uniform crisp even at this hour. Sarah Whitmore from the bureau, looking like she'd been awake for days. Representatives from other agencies. And Timothy Park, the federal prosecutor who'd been assigned to the case when I'd recused myself from the prosecution role. Timothy was young, 39, brilliant, hungry. He'd made his name prosecuting white-collar crime in Manhattan before moving to the Department of Justice. He was good at his job, but he lacked the one thing you couldn't teach: experience with the kind of people who believed laws were for others. I took my seat, didn't speak, waited. General Chen started. "Thank you all for coming in early. We have a development that accelerates our timeline significantly." He pulled up an image on the screen. A surveillance photo of Daniel and Marcus boarding a private jet. This was taken yesterday afternoon. Private charter, filed flight plan to Dubai via London. They canceled the flight 2 hours before departure, but we believe this was a test run. They're planning to leave the country. Sarah Whitmore leaned forward. "Do we have enough to arrest now, before they can execute?" Timothy Park shook his head. "We have evidence, but we need to present it properly. If we move too fast, their lawyers will shred us on procedure. We need the investigation to be airtight." "It is airtight," I said quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. I'd been mostly silent in these meetings, deferring to Timothy, staying in my lane as the technical analyst. But there are moments when silence becomes complicity, and this was one of them. "The investigation is airtight," I repeated. "We have financial records, server logs, encrypted communications, witness statements, and physical evidence. We have them moving $340 million in illegal technology sales through 14 shell companies in 7 countries. We have them on video discussing the transfers. We have everything we need." General Chen studied me. "Then what's the problem?" "The problem is they know we have it. They have specific details about our investigation that we never made public, which means either we have a leak or they have access to our systems." Sarah Whitmore's expression darkened. "Are you suggesting we have a compromised agent?" "I'm not suggesting. I'm stating. Someone with access to our classified files has been feeding information to the suspects, and until we identify and neutralize that source, everything we do will be anticipated." The room went silent. Timothy finally spoke. "Do you know who it is?" I pulled out a folder, one I'd prepared at 3 in the morning, unable to sleep, my mind racing through possibilities. Inside were printouts, digital forensics, metadata analysis, the kind of technical investigation that most people found incomprehensible, but that told me everything I needed to know. Walter Brennan, Deputy Director, Office of General Counsel. He's been accessing our case files outside normal work hours. He's been copying documents to an external drive. And 6 months ago, he had a gambling debt of $340,000 that was paid off by a shell company registered to an address in Dubai that matches one of our target entities. I slid the folder across the table. General Chen opened it, read for 30 seconds, and looked up at me with something I rarely saw in his eyes: surprise. How long have you known this? I confirmed it last night. I suspected for 3 weeks but needed proof. Why didn't you bring this to us sooner? Because I needed to be certain. An accusation like this destroys a career. I needed evidence that would stand up in court. Now I have it. Sarah Whitmore was already on her phone, texting someone. I'll have agents arrest him within the hour. We'll offer him a deal, cooperate, or face espionage charges. I shook my head. Not yet. She looked up, confused. If we arrest Brennan now, Daniel and Marcus will know we're onto them. They'll run immediately and we might lose them. But if we let Brennan think he's still undetected, we can feed him false information. Make them think they're safe. Make them think they have more time than they do. General Chen smiled slowly. You want to use him? I want to turn their advantage into our trap. Timothy Park was taking notes rapidly. What kind of false information? We tell Brennan the investigation hit a snag. Technical problems with our server logs. We need another 3 weeks to rebuild the evidence chain. Meanwhile, we prepare to arrest them the moment they think they're safe. Sarah Whitmore nodded slowly. It could work, but it's risky if they run anyway. They won't. They think they're winning. People who think they're winning don't run. They celebrate. I thought about last night's dinner. The champagne, the laughter, the absolute confidence that they were smarter than everyone else. Trust me, I said. They think they've already won. General Chen closed the folder. All right, Margaret's plan moves forward. Sarah, coordinate on the Brennan surveillance. Timothy, prepare the arrest warrants but don't file them yet. Margaret, I need you to prepare your expert witness testimony. If this goes to trial, and it will, you're our key to making the technical evidence understandable to a jury. Everyone nodded and started gathering their things. Margaret, General Chen said, stay for a moment. The room cleared, just the two of us. He sat down across from me, his expression softer than it had been during the briefing. I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. I waited. Your son is named Marcus Foster. He's 35. He runs a cryptocurrency company in McLean. And 6 weeks ago, we identified him as a person of interest in this investigation. My throat tightened, but I kept my expression neutral. That's correct. You've known about his involvement for 6 weeks, and you haven't said anything. I recused myself from the prosecution the moment I confirmed his connection. That's protocol. That's minimum protocol. Most people in your position would have requested a full transfer off the case, but you're still here, still leading the technical analysis, still providing testimony. Why? I looked at this man who'd been my commanding officer for 12 years, who'd seen me at my best and my worst, who'd trusted me with classified information that could reshape global power structures. Because the case is bigger than my personal feelings, because national security doesn't stop mattering just because it's inconvenient for me, and because, I paused, choosing my words carefully, because my son made his choices, and I made mine, and those choices don't overlap. General Chen studied me for a long moment. That dinner last night, the family dinner Marcus invited you to, was that part of this? I should have been surprised that he knew about the dinner. But intelligence officers track everything, and I'd stopped being surprised by what General Chen knew years ago. Daniel was there. He talked about the case, specific details about our investigation that he shouldn't have known. He mentioned server logs, Dubai transfer dates, Singapore alibis. He was confident, almost boastful. And Marcus? My voice caught slightly, but I pushed through. Marcus laughed along with him, My son knows about his uncle's crimes, and he's participating in them. I'm sorry, Margaret. Don't be, I'm not. He raised an eyebrow. I spent 30 years trying to earn my family's respect, trying to prove I was worth their attention. And it took me until I was 58 to realize I don't need their respect. I have the respect of everyone who actually matters, including myself. General Chen stood, extended his hand. I shook it. The moment this case goes public, he said, your life is going to get very complicated. The media will find out about Marcus. They'll paint you as either a hero or a traitor to your own family. Are you ready for that? I thought about Marcus's laugh at the dinner table, Jennifer's dismissive comments, Daniel's casual cruelty, the lifetime of being invisible, unheard, underestimated. I'm ready. I left the secure facility and returned to my regular office, the one with windows, the one where I did the non-classified work. My desk was standard government issue, metal, gray, functional, no personal photos, no decorations, nothing that would tell a visitor anything about who I was. That was intentional. My computer pinged with a new email. Subject line, checking in. From Marcus. I opened it. Hey Mom, just wanted to make sure you got home okay last night. Jennifer felt bad about the staff comment. She didn't mean anything by it. Anyway, I know things have been tense between us lately, but I want you to know I appreciate you. Maybe we can have lunch sometime, just the two of us. Let me know. Love, Marcus. I read it twice. This was how it always went. The casual cruelty followed by the olive branch, the insult chased by the apology. It kept me off balance, kept me hoping, kept me coming back for more. Kept me controllable. I'd fallen for it for years. Every time he threw me a scrap of affection, I'd convinced myself things were improving, that he still loved me, that I still mattered. But I'd learned. Finally, painfully, I'd learned. I typed a response. I'm glad Jennifer didn't mean anything by it. I'd love to have lunch sometime. Let me know when you're free. Polite, warm, exactly what he expected. I hit send and immediately forwarded the email to a folder I'd labeled Evidence. Because every communication might matter. Because even love letters could become exhibits. Because I'd stopped being his mother the moment he'd started being a criminal. The rest of the day passed in meetings, reports, analysis. I briefed 3 different teams on technical aspects of the case. I reviewed forensic data. I prepared charts and graphs that would make complex cryptocurrency transactions understandable to people who still used checkbooks. At 6 in the evening, I packed up my things and drove home through rush hour traffic, back to my small house in Arlington. I heated up leftover soup for dinner. Again, ate it standing at the counter. Again, washed the bowl and put it in the drying rack. Again. This was my life, small, quiet, unremarkable. This was the life my family pitied. This was the life that hid $5 million in carefully managed investments and a career that had influenced international policy. This was the life that was about to change everything. My phone rang, unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. A man's voice, professional, brisk. Ms. Foster, this is Richard Kellerman from Kellerman and Associates. I represent Daniel Foster in his current legal matter. I understand you may be called as a witness in this case. I'd like to schedule a time to speak with you regarding your testimony. Please call me back at your earliest convenience. I deleted the message. They were starting to realize I existed. Good. Let them wonder. Let them worry. Let them start to understand that the invisible woman they'd dismissed for 30 years was about to become the most important person in their lives. I went upstairs, changed into pajamas, old, comfortable, bought at a discount store, and climbed into bed. Tomorrow would bring more meetings, more evidence, more preparation. But tonight, I allowed myself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Because for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't trying to prove myself to my family. I was preparing to prosecute them. And there was a beautiful, terrible clarity in that. I reached over to turn off the bedside lamp, and my hand brushed against the framed photo of James. His face smiled up at me, frozen at 47, before the cancer, before the pain, when he still believed we had decades ahead of us. "I'm going to be okay, James. I know you were worried, but I'm going to be okay." In the darkness, I could almost hear his response. "I never doubted it, Maggie, not for a second." I closed my eyes. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Tomorrow, I would start building the case that would destroy my family. Tomorrow, the invisible woman would finally be seen. The meeting with Walter Brennan happened in a parking garage 3 levels below street level, concrete pillars casting shadows that swallowed sound. I'd chosen the location deliberately. No cameras, no witnesses, just 2 people, and the truth hanging between them like a blade. He arrived 10 minutes late, a calculated move meant to assert dominance. 63 years old, silver hair, expensive suit that didn't quite hide the stress weight he'd gained over the past 6 months. His eyes darted to the corners of the garage, looking for backup, for surveillance, for any indication this was a trap. It was, just not the kind he expected. "Margaret," he tried for casual, landed somewhere near terrified. "Your email said this was urgent, something about the Phantom Protocol files." I stood with my back to my car, arms crossed, expression neutral. The fluorescent lights hummed above us, casting everything in sickly yellow. "I know what you've been doing, Walter. I know about the offshore accounts. I know about the gambling debt that disappeared 6 months ago. I know about the files you've been copying to external drives at 2 in the morning when you thought no one was watching." His face drained of color, aging him a decade in seconds. "I don't. I have no idea what you're talking about." "Walter, please, don't insult both of us. I have server logs showing every file you accessed. I have financial records tracing the payment that cleared your debt back to a shell company in Dubai. The same shell company Daniel Foster uses for his illegal transactions. I have security footage of you leaving the building with classified materials. I have everything." His legs seemed to give out slightly. He leaned against a pillar, one hand pressed to his chest. "My wife," he whispered. "She has cancer, stage 3, the treatments. We lost everything. The house, the savings, everything. They said they'd help. They said it was just information, nothing that would hurt anyone." I felt a flicker of sympathy, quickly suppressed. Compassion was a luxury I couldn't afford. "How much did they pay you?" 340,000, exactly what we owed to the hospitals and the loan sharks. His voice cracked. "I'm not a traitor, Margaret. I was just desperate." Desperation doesn't excuse treason. You gave classified information to people who are actively working against American interests. You helped them stay one step ahead of a federal investigation. Because of you, they've been able to hide evidence, create false alibis, obstruct justice. I didn't know it would go this far. I thought it was just financial crimes, white-collar stuff. I didn't know about the technology exports, the national security implications. Would it have mattered if you did? He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw the answer. Probably not. When your wife is dying and debt collectors are calling, and you're 63 years old with no way out, national security becomes an abstraction. Survival becomes everything. But understanding his motives didn't mean forgiving them. You have two choices, Walter. Choice one: I take this evidence to the FBI right now. They arrest you, charge you with espionage and obstruction of justice. You're looking at 25 years minimum in federal prison. Your wife spends whatever time she has left alone, visiting you behind glass, watching you rot in a cell while she fights cancer by herself. His breathing was ragged now, close to hyperventilating. Choice two: you cooperate. You become our asset. You feed Daniel and Marcus the information we want them to have. You help us turn their advantage into our trap. In exchange, we charge you with a lesser offense, unauthorized disclosure of classified information, not espionage. You serve maybe 3 to 5 years. You're out in time to spend your wife's final years together, whatever time she has left. Why would you offer me that? Because I need you operational. If we arrest you now, they'll know we're onto them and they'll run. But if you stay in place, we can control what they know. We can make them think they're winning right up until the moment we destroy them. He straightened up, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. What do you want me to tell them? I pulled out a folder from my car, handed it to him. Tell them the investigation hit a major snag. Our technical expert, that's me, made errors in the forensic analysis of the server logs. We have to rebuild the entire evidence chain from scratch. Tell them it's going to take at least 3 weeks, maybe 4. Tell them they have time. And the truth. The truth is we're filing arrest warrants in 7 days. The truth is every piece of evidence is solid. The truth is they're going to be in federal custody before they know what hit them. Walter opened the folder, scanned the fabricated documents inside. His hands trembled. If I do this, if I help you, my wife, she can't know. She thinks I'm one of the good guys. She can't die knowing what I became. Something in my chest tightened. Even traitors love someone. Even criminals have people they're trying to protect. We'll be discreet. The charges will be sealed until after trial. The media won't get your name unless absolutely necessary. Your wife doesn't have to know the extent of it. He nodded slowly, defeated, resigned. Okay, I'll do it. I'll feed them the false timeline. Good. One more thing, Walter. They're planning to flee. They have tickets booked, assets ready to transfer. If you tip them off in any way, if you deviate from the script I'm giving you, the deal is off. You'll face the full 25 years, and I'll make sure everyone knows you chose criminals over your country. I understand. I held his gaze, making sure he saw the truth in my eyes. I would do exactly what I'd threatened. I'd spent 30 years in this business. I knew how to make promises and how to keep them, pleasant or otherwise. Then we're done here. Memorize those documents tonight. Burn them tomorrow. Contact Daniel by Friday. And Walter, your wife is going to need you when she finds out. Be the husband she deserves, even if you couldn't be the man your country needed. I got in my car and drove away, leaving him standing in that parking garage, a broken man who traded his integrity for his wife's medical bills. I didn't judge him as harshly as I probably should have, because I understood what it meant to sacrifice everything for family. I'd just chosen a different kind of sacrifice. The drive back to my office took 15 minutes through midday traffic. I parked in my usual spot, far from the entrance, where the spaces were always available, and walked through security with my badge and my secrets. Timothy Park was waiting in my office, sitting in the uncomfortable government-issue chair that made everyone's back hurt within 10 minutes. He stood when I entered, professional courtesy from a man half my age who somehow still treated me with genuine respect. Mrs. Foster, I got your message. You said you have a development. I closed the door, locked it, pulled down the small window shade. Brennan's cooperating. He's going to feed them a false timeline, tell them we need 3 to 4 weeks to rebuild our evidence. Meanwhile, We file arrest warrants in 7 days and execute them the moment the warrants are signed. Timothy's eyes widened. You got him to flip. How? I gave him a choice between 25 years for espionage or 3 to 5 years for disclosure. He chose survival. They always do. And you trust him not to warn them. I trust his fear more than his loyalty. He knows if he deviates, his wife finds out everything and he dies in prison. Fear is more reliable than trust. Timothy pulled out his laptop, started taking notes. Okay, if we're moving in 7 days, I need to finalize the indictments. We're charging both Daniel and Marcus with violations of the International Traffic in Arms Regulations, conspiracy to commit technology transfer crimes, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. The total exposure is 30 to 40 years each, potentially more with enhancements. I sat down at my desk, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline from confronting Brennan was fading, leaving behind the reality of what I was doing. Building a case against my own son. Preparing to watch him be arrested, tried, convicted, imprisoned. Timothy, I need to ask you something. He looked up from his laptop. When this goes to trial, and I know it will because Daniel's too arrogant to plead, his defense team is going to come after me. They're going to paint me as a vindictive mother, a woman with an axe to grind, someone who couldn't handle her son's success. They're going to make this personal. I know, we're prepared for that. Are you prepared for what it's going to look like? A federal prosecutor using a woman's testimony against her own son. The media is going to crucify us. They're going to make me the villain, not Daniel. Timothy closed his laptop, leaned forward. Mrs. Foster, I've read your file, all of it. The classified parts, the stuff even your family doesn't know about. You've stopped terrorist financing networks. You've prevented technology transfers that could have cost American lives. You've served this country for 30 years with distinction. When the truth comes out, and it will, you won't be the villain. You'll be the hero. Heroes don't send their sons to prison. Heroes do their duty, even when it costs them everything. The words hung in the air. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe that doing the right thing would somehow redeem the grief, justify the loss, make sense of the wreckage I was about to create. But I'd lived long enough to know that sometimes doing the right thing just means you get to live with yourself afterward. It doesn't mean anyone else will understand. There's something else you should know, I said. Daniel's legal team, Kellerman and Associates, they're the best criminal defense attorneys in the country. Richard Kellerman hasn't lost a case in 15 years. He's brutal, brilliant, and he'll do anything to win. I'm aware of his reputation. He's also already trying to contact me. Left a voicemail yesterday asking to discuss my potential testimony. He's fishing, trying to figure out who I am and what I know. Timothy frowned. You haven't responded. Of course not, but he's going to keep digging. And eventually, he's going to realize that the low-level government bureaucrat his client has been mocking is actually one of the most senior intelligence analysts in the Defense Department. When he realizes that, his entire defense strategy falls apart. Exactly, which is why we need to be ready for him to pivot. He's going to shift from attacking my credentials to attacking my motives. He's going to say I manufactured evidence because I was angry at my family, that I'm settling scores disguised as justice. Timothy stood up, started pacing. Then we need to make your credentials undeniable before we even get to trial. We need judges, prosecutors, law enforcement, everyone, to know exactly who you are before Kellerman starts spreading his narrative. How do you propose we do that? He stopped, turned to face me. You testify before a grand jury. Next week before the arrests. We present your evidence in a formal legal setting where Kellerman can't cross-examine you, can't spin it, can't control the narrative. The grand jury sees the real Margaret Foster, the expert, the professional, the woman who built an airtight case. And then when Kellerman tries to discredit you at trial, the prosecutors, the judge, everyone already knows better. It was smart, risky but smart. A grand jury testimony becomes part of the official record. It can be referenced at trial. Exactly. And more importantly, it establishes your credibility before the defense can poison the well. I thought about it. Imagined sitting in a federal courthouse, under oath, laying out the evidence against my brother and my son in front of 23 strangers who would decide whether they deserved to be indicted. Imagine the moment when one of those grand jurors asked the inevitable question, "Ma'am, you understand you're testifying against your own family." Imagined my answer, "I'm testifying for my country." "Schedule it," I said. "I'll testify." Timothy nodded, already pulling out his phone to make calls. I turned to my computer, pulled up the encrypted files I'd been compiling for 16 months. Financial records, communications intercepts, forensic analyses, witness statements. Thousands of pages of evidence, each one a nail in the coffin I was building. My phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "Lunch this week. I'm free Thursday or Friday." Thursday was the day I'd be testifying before the grand jury. Friday was the day the arrest warrants would be signed. I typed back, "Thursday works, name the place." 3 dots appeared then. "Great! There's a new place in Georgetown, Osteria Morini, 1 p.m. An expensive Italian restaurant. Of course. Marcus never chose places where I'd feel comfortable. He chose places that reminded me of the gap between his world and mine. "Sounds good. See you then." I set the phone down and stared at the screen. In 4 days, I would have lunch with my son. We'd sit across from each other, make small talk, pretend everything was normal. And he'd have no idea that earlier that same day, I'd spent 3 hours convincing 23 grand jurors to indict him for crimes that carried decades in federal prison. The cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. But I didn't change the plan. Because cruelty disguised as kindness had been the story of my relationship with Marcus for 15 years. He'd mastered the art of making me feel loved just enough to keep me hoping, then pulling it away just enough to keep me hungry. Turnabout, as they say, is fair play. The next 3 days blurred together in a haze of preparation. I worked 16-hour shifts, reviewing every detail of the case, anticipating every question the grand jury might ask, every angle Kellerman might eventually exploit. Timothy brought in experts from the FBI's cyber division to walk me through best practices for explaining complex technical evidence to laypeople. We practiced dumbing down encryption protocols without losing accuracy. We rehearsed analogies that would make cryptocurrency transactions understandable to retired teachers and small business owners serving on the jury. Sarah Whitmore from the FBI stopped by my office Wednesday afternoon with coffee and concern. "Margaret, you look exhausted. When's the last time you slept a full night?" I accepted the coffee, which was probably better than anything I'd made for myself in weeks. Sleep is overrated when you're building a conspiracy case against your family. She sat down, her expression shifting from professional to something softer. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Are you okay? Really okay? Because what you're about to do, testifying against your son, that's going to leave scars. I've seen it break people. Strong people." I took a sip of coffee, considering how much truth to share. "Sarah, I haven't been okay since my son started treating me like an inconvenience instead of his mother. I haven't been okay since my brother called me worthless to my face at a family dinner. I haven't been okay for a very long time, but I'm functional, I'm focused. and I'm going to see this through. That's not the same as being okay. No, but it's enough. She studied me with the kind of perception that made her good at her job. You know what's going to happen when this goes public, right? The media will dig into everything. Your finances, your career, your relationship with Marcus. They'll paint you as either a saint or a monster, and there's no middle ground in these stories. I know. And you're prepared for Marcus to hate you, for your parents to choose him over you, for everyone who's ever called you family to turn their backs. I set down the coffee, met her eyes directly. Sarah, they already turned their backs. Years ago. I just spent 3 decades pretending not to notice. This isn't me destroying my family. This is me finally admitting it was already destroyed and stopping them from destroying anyone else. She nodded slowly, seemed to understand something she hadn't before. For what it's worth, I think you're incredibly brave. And I think your son has no idea how lucky he was to have you as a mother. He'll realize it someday, probably in a prison cell, and it's going to destroy him. That's not my problem anymore. But it was, and we both knew it. Thursday morning arrived cold and gray, the kind of Washington, D.C. weather that matched the weight in my chest. I dressed in my most professional suit, navy blue, tailored but not expensive, the kind that said competent without saying wealthy. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun, minimal makeup, small pearl earrings James had given me for our 10th anniversary. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman who'd aged into authority. 58 years of experience etched into every line, every gray hair, every hard-won piece of wisdom. I looked like someone you'd trust. I hoped the grand jury would agree. The federal courthouse in downtown D.C. was a fortress of marble and security. I went through the same checkpoints everyone did: metal detectors, bag search, ID verification, even though the marshals recognized me and knew I posed no threat. Timothy met me on the 3rd floor, outside the grand jury room. Ready, as I'll ever be. Remember, this isn't adversarial. No defense attorney, no cross-examination. Just you, the evidence, and 23 citizens trying to determine if there's probable cause to indict. Be clear, be factual, be yourself. I nodded, but my hands were shaking slightly. Timothy noticed. Mrs. Foster, you've briefed rooms full of generals and intelligence directors. You've testified before Congress. A grand jury should be easy compared to that. Those generals weren't deciding whether to indict my son. No, but this grand jury is deciding whether your son committed crimes. And you know he did. Let the evidence speak. A marshal opened the door. They're ready for you, Ms. Foster. I walked into the room. 23 faces turned toward me, diverse in age, race, gender, background. The cross-section of America that would decide if my family had broken the law badly enough to face trial. The prosecutor handling the session, a woman named Rachel Martinez, sharp and efficient, gestured to the witness chair. Ms. Foster, please state your full name and occupation for the record. I sat down, raised my right hand for the oath, and spoke clearly. Margaret Ann Foster, Senior Strategic Intelligence Analyst, Defense Intelligence Agency, specializing in cyber warfare, cryptographic export violations, and international technology transfer crimes. Several jurors sat up straighter. The retired teacher in the front row whispered something to the accountant next to her. Rachel continued, Ms. Foster, how long have you worked in this field? 30 years, 2 months, 18 days. And can you briefly describe your educational background? Bachelor of Science in Computer Science from MIT, summa cum laude. Master of Science in Cryptography from Stanford. Doctoral coursework at Carnegie Mellon, unfinished due to family obligations. I watched their faces change as my credentials stacked up. The skepticism in some eyes shifted to respect. The boredom in others shifted to attention. Ms. Foster, we're here today to examine evidence in the case of United States v. Daniel Foster and Marcus Foster. Can you explain your connection to the defendants? Here it was, the moment of truth. Daniel Foster is my younger brother. Marcus Foster is my son. The room went completely silent. A young woman in the back row, maybe 25, looked like a grad student, put her hand over her mouth. Rachel, to her credit, didn't pause. And despite this familial relationship, you are the primary investigator in this case. I recused myself from the prosecution team 6 weeks ago when my son's involvement was confirmed. But I remain available as an expert witness regarding the technical evidence I gathered over 16 months of investigation. Why didn't you recuse yourself from the investigation entirely? Because the investigation is bigger than my personal relationships. Because the evidence is solid regardless of who gathered it. And because national security doesn't stop mattering when it becomes personally inconvenient. A few jurors nodded. The retired teacher was writing notes rapidly. Rachel pulled up a presentation on the screen. Ms. Foster, can you walk us through what you discovered in Operation Phantom Protocol? I spent the next 2 hours laying it out methodically. The suspicious cryptocurrency transactions that triggered the initial investigation. The shell companies in Dubai, Singapore, the Cayman Islands. The encrypted communications between Daniel, Marcus, and foreign entities on the U.S. sanctions list. The technology they'd illegally exported. Military-grade encryption algorithms developed by DARPA, classified under ITAR, worth over $300 million on the black market. I showed them the money trail. $47 million in profits split between the two defendants. I showed them the server logs proving Marcus had personally architected the technical infrastructure for the illegal transfers. I showed them the video evidence of Daniel discussing the scheme with foreign buyers. And I showed them the national security implications. The technology they'd sold could be used to encrypt communications in ways that compromised U.S. military operations. It could cost American lives. By the time I finished, several jurors looked physically ill. An older man in the middle row, looked like a retired military officer based on his posture, raised his hand. Ma'am, I need to ask, how do you sit here and testify against your own son? I have kids, I can't imagine. I took a breath, let the question settle. I raised my son to understand right from wrong. I raised him to believe in integrity, in service, in putting the greater good ahead of personal gain. He chose to ignore every value I tried to teach him. He chose to commit crimes that endanger his country for money. My job, my duty, is to hold people accountable when they break laws designed to protect American lives. That duty doesn't stop applying because the criminal is someone I love. The military veteran nodded slowly, eyes glistening. A middle-aged woman in business attire spoke up. Does your son know you're the one who investigated him? No, he thinks I'm a low-level IT support person who fixes computers. He has no idea what I actually do for a living. My family has spent decades underestimating me, dismissing me, treating me as irrelevant. I let them believe it because being underestimated has its advantages in intelligence work. Several jurors actually smiled at that. The young grad student was openly crying. Rachel moved to her final questions. Ms. Foster, is there any doubt in your mind that the defendants committed the crimes outlined in the proposed indictment? None whatsoever. Is there any evidence you've withheld because of your personal relationship to the defendants? No, I've actually been more thorough because I knew my work would be scrutinized more heavily. Every piece of evidence has been verified, cross-referenced, and independently confirmed. If you had to do this investigation again, knowing it would lead to indicting your own family, would you do anything differently? I paused, really considered the question. I would have recused myself from prosecution sooner, not because I did anything wrong, but because it would have saved me some sleepless nights. But the investigation itself? No, I wouldn't change a single thing. The evidence is the evidence. The law is the law, and justice is blind, even when it shouldn't be. Rachel thanked me. The grand jury foreman asked if anyone had additional questions. No hands went up. I was excused. I walked out of that room knowing what was coming. Grand juries indict in over 99% of cases. This one would be no different. By tomorrow, the indictments would be signed. By Monday, the arrest warrants would be executed. And at 1 o'clock that afternoon, I had lunch with Marcus. The restaurant was exactly what I expected. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs, a menu without prices. The kind of place where a Caesar salad cost $35 and the waiters introduced themselves with their pronouns and their favorite dish. Marcus was already seated at a table by the window when I arrived. He stood when he saw me, kissed my cheek with the practiced warmth of someone who'd learned affection as a social skill rather than a genuine emotion. "Mom, you look nice. Is that a new suit?" It was 8 years old, but I smiled and lied. "Thank you, sweetheart. You look well." He did. Expensive haircut, tailored shirt, watch that cost more than my car. Success radiating off him like heat. We ordered. I got the cheapest pasta on the menu. He got the market fish at $68 and made small talk about nothing. His business was doing well. Jennifer's Instagram following had hit 200,000. The Tesla needed new tires. Finally, after the entrees arrived, he got to the real reason for lunch. "Mom, I wanted to talk to you about something. Uncle Daniel's trial is coming up soon, and we're all a little worried about how it's going to affect the family." I kept my expression neutral. Fork paused halfway to my mouth. "Oh. Yeah, I mean, it's all nonsense, obviously. The charges are politically motivated, the investigators are incompetent, his lawyers are going to tear it apart. But still, the media attention, the optics, it's not great." "I imagine not." He leaned forward, dropping his voice like he was sharing something confidential. "The thing is, there's this investigator, Margaret Foster. No relation to us, apparently just a coincidence with the last name. But she's the one who built the case, and Daniel's lawyers think she's got some kind of personal vendetta. Like maybe she had a bad experience with someone named Foster once, and she's taking it out on him." I took a sip of water to hide my reaction. "That sounds unlikely." "I know, right? But apparently she's obsessed. Spent 16 months on this case. Daniel's legal team thinks she might have fabricated evidence or at least exaggerated things. They're going to destroy her credibility at trial." "How do you know so much about the investigation, Marcus? I thought that was all confidential." He waved his hand dismissively. "Daniel has good lawyers, they have sources. You know how it works. Money talks." My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice steady. "And you're not concerned that maybe Daniel actually did something wrong?" His face hardened, just slightly. "Mom, come on. You've met Daniel. He's brilliant. He's been successful at everything he's done. You really think he's stupid enough to commit federal crimes?" I looked at my son across the table, 35 years old. Everything I'd once hoped he'd become, sitting right in front of me, defending a criminal because that criminal had money and status and the kind of success Marcus worshipped. Marcus, I need to tell you something, and I need you to really hear me. He sighed, the patience of someone humoring a difficult parent. Okay. Success without integrity is just elaborate failure. Money earned through crime isn't success, it's evidence. And defending someone just because they're family, just because they're rich, just because they tell you what you want to hear, that's not loyalty. That's complicity. His jaw tightened. Is this about Daniel or about me? Because I'm tired of the lectures, Mom. I'm tired of you acting like your safe little government job is somehow more noble than people who actually take risks and build things. I'm not lecturing you. I'm warning you. Warning me about what? I set down my fork, met his eyes directly. I'm warning you that choices have consequences, that the life you're living might not be as secure as you think it is, that the people you trust might not be trustworthy, that the foundation you've built your success on might be quicksand. He laughed, but it was hollow. God, Mom, you're so dramatic. Everything's fine. My business is legitimate. Daniel's going to beat this case, and life is good. Maybe instead of worrying about me, you should focus on yourself. When's the last time you did something for you? Took a vacation, bought something nice, lived a little. The waiter arrived with dessert menus. Marcus ordered tiramisu. I declined. When the waiter left, Marcus pulled out his phone, showed me a photo. This is the new boat Daniel and I are buying together. 52 feet, fully equipped. We're taking it to the Caribbean next month. You should come. Get some sun, relax, forget about work for a while. Next month, Daniel would be in federal custody awaiting trial. The boat would be seized as proceeds of crime, and Marcus would be sitting in a cell trying to understand how it all fell apart. That sounds lovely, sweetheart, but I can't make any promises about next month. Work is complicated. He put the phone away, clearly disappointed that I wasn't more enthusiastic about his latest toy. We finished lunch with more empty conversation. He paid with a black American Express card. I thanked him. We hugged goodbye on the sidewalk, and he promised to call soon. I watched him walk away, designer shoes clicking on the pavement, supremely confident in his invincibility. And I felt my heart break for the last time. Because tomorrow, the indictments would be unsealed. And my son would learn that his boring, irrelevant mother was the architect of his destruction. The call came at 6:47 on Monday morning. I was already awake, had been for hours, sitting at my kitchen table with cold coffee and the weight of what was about to happen pressing down like atmospheric pressure before a storm. Timothy Park's voice was tight with controlled excitement. The warrants are signed. FBI is moving in 30 minutes. Simultaneous arrests at both locations, Daniel's estate in Potomac and Marcus's house in McLean. I wanted you to know before it happens. I closed my eyes, feeling the finality of it. Thank you for telling me. Margaret, you don't have to do anything today. Take the day off. Let us handle the arrests and the arraignments. You've done your part. But I hadn't, not completely. Because there was one more thing I needed to do, one final act of mercy disguised as cruelty. I'll be in the office by 8. There are still things to prepare for trial. Are you sure? The media is going to be all over this once the arrests happen. It might be better if you're not. I'm sure. I'll see you in a few hours. I hung up and sat in the silence of my small kitchen. Through the window, I could see my neighbor Mrs. Chen watering her garden, oblivious to the fact that in less than an hour, federal agents would be putting handcuffs on 2 men who shared my last name. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus sent at 6:42. Morning, Mom. Great seeing you Thursday. Let's do it again soon. Love you. 5 minutes before the FBI arrived at his door. 5 minutes before his entire world collapsed. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. At 7:15, my phone rang again. Unknown number, I answered. Margaret Foster, a woman's voice, professional, clipped. Speaking. This is Rachel Morrison with the Washington Post. I'm calling about the arrests this morning in the Foster case. Can you confirm that you're related to the defendants and that you were the primary investigator? Word was already leaking. Probably from someone at the FBI, maybe from the courthouse. It didn't matter. The story was out. I have no comment at this time. All questions should be directed to the Department of Justice press office. Ms. Foster, our sources say you're the mother of one of the defendants. Is that accurate? I hung up. The phone rang again immediately. Different number. I turned it off. By the time I arrived at my office at 7:55, the news was everywhere. CNN had a breaking news banner. Major technology export case. 2 arrested in $340 million scheme. Fox News was running footage of FBI agents outside Daniel's estate. MSNBC had a legal analyst explaining ITAR violations to viewers who'd never heard the term before. None of them had my name yet, but they would. Within hours, some enterprising journalist would make the connection between the defendants and the investigator, and then the real feeding frenzy would begin. Timothy was waiting in my office, along with Sarah Whitmore and General Chen. All 3 stood when I entered, a show of respect that felt almost like condolence. Both in custody, Sarah reported. Daniel at his home, Marcus at his office. No resistance from either one. They're being processed now, arraignments scheduled for 2 p.m. Did they say anything? Daniel invoked immediately, wouldn't talk without his lawyer. Marcus. She paused, glanced at General Chen. Marcus asked to speak to his mother. The room went quiet. He doesn't know yet, I said softly. He still thinks I'm just Mom, the woman who has lunch with him and listens to him talk about boats. General Chen stepped forward, his expression a mixture of concern and something that looked like paternal worry. Margaret, I've already arranged for a security detail. The moment the media identifies you, your house is going to be under siege. We can move you to a secure location until this dies down. I'm not hiding. I'm not asking you to hide. I'm asking you to be safe. There are people who are going to see you as a traitor to your family. There are people who are going to see you as a hero. Both groups are going to want access to you, and not all of them will be friendly. He was right. I knew he was right. But the thought of hiding, of running, of giving anyone the satisfaction of seeing me flinch, it turned my stomach. I'll accept the security, but I'm staying in my house. I'm going to work. I'm living my life. They don't get to make me invisible again. Sarah pulled out her tablet, showed me the screen. It was already starting. Social media posts about the case, armchair detectives on Reddit connecting dots, conspiracy theories forming in real time. It's going to get worse before it gets better. Once your name comes out, once people realize you investigated your own son. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Let it get worse. I did nothing wrong. I served my country. I followed the evidence. If people want to crucify me for that, they can get in line. Timothy's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face paling. Kellerman just released a statement. He's holding a press conference at 11 a.m. Timothy looked up at me, genuine distress in his eyes. He's already pivoting the defense strategy. He's claiming the investigation was tainted by a vengeful family member with a personal grudge. He doesn't even know it's me yet. He will by 11. Someone's going to leak it, or he's going to find out when he reviews the grand jury transcripts. Either way, he's going to use it. General Chen's jaw tightened. Then we get ahead of it. Margaret, I want you to do a press conference. Today, before Kellerman can define you, before the narrative becomes bitter mother destroys son. We tell the truth first. I shook my head. Absolutely not. I'm not turning this into a media circus. The evidence speaks for itself. Let Kellerman spin whatever story he wants. When we get to trial, the jury will see the truth. The jury is going to be selected from a pool of people who have been watching cable news. If Kellerman spends the next 6 months painting you as unhinged, that's what they'll believe before they ever hear your testimony. Then we make sure my testimony is so solid, so thorough, so professional that it shatters whatever narrative he's built. I won't win this in the court of public opinion. I'll win it in an actual court. Sarah exchanged a look with Timothy. They both knew I was right, even if they didn't like it. At least let us prepare a written statement, Timothy offered. Something we can release to the media explaining your credentials, your record, your professionalism. Let people know who you really are. Fine, draft something. Run it by me before it goes out. But I'm not doing interviews, I'm not doing press conferences, and I'm not defending myself to strangers who have already made up their minds. My office phone rang. The receptionist's voice came through, apologetic and stressed. Ms. Foster, I have 17 media calls holding. They all want to speak with you about the Foster case. What should I tell them? Tell them I'm not taking calls. Refer them to DOJ Public Affairs. And hold all my calls for the rest of the day unless they're from General Chen, Timothy Park, or Sarah Whitmore. Yes, ma'am. Also, there are 2 reporters in the lobby asking to see you. Tell security to escort them out. No media in the building. I hung up and looked at the 3 people in my office, the only ones besides Walter Brennan who knew the full truth of what I was about to endure. I need to prepare for the arraignment. I need to review the indictments one more time, make sure there are no gaps Kellerman can exploit. I need to work. So unless there's something else critical, I'd appreciate some space. They filed out quietly, leaving me alone with my computer and my conscience. I pulled up the indictment documents. 57 pages of charges, evidence summaries, legal citations. Every paragraph a nail, every footnote a hammer. Together, they built a cage that would hold Daniel and Marcus for decades. And I'd forged every piece of it. My personal phone, the one I'd turned off earlier, started buzzing from inside my purse. I pulled it out, turned it back on. 23 missed calls, 46 text messages. Most were from reporters, but 3 were from my mother. Maggie, what is happening? We just saw the news. Daniel has been arrested. Please call me. The news is saying someone in the family helped the FBI. Please tell me that's not true. Please call. Margaret Ann Foster, you call me right now. Your father is having chest pains. We need to know what's going on. I stared at the messages. Chest pains. My father was 82, had a history of heart problems. The stress of Daniel's arrest could genuinely be dangerous for him. I called the number for their assisted living facility in Florida, asked to speak to the nurse on duty. This is Margaret Foster. I'm calling about Richard and Evelyn Foster. I understand my father may be experiencing chest pains. The nurse, her name was Patricia, I'd spoken to her before, sounded calm. He was earlier, around 8 this morning. We ran an EKG and his vitals. It appears to be anxiety-related rather than cardiac. His doctor prescribed a mild sedative. He's resting now. And my mother. She's quite upset. She's been trying to reach you. She's asking a lot of questions about what's happening with your brother. Can you tell her I'll call this evening? I'm dealing with a work crisis and can't talk right now. Of course. Is there anything you'd like me to tell her? Tell her everything is going to be okay, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. I hung up and immediately felt the lies settle in my stomach. Everything was not going to be okay. Everything was falling apart, had been falling apart for years, and I just accelerated the collapse. At 11 a.m., I watched Kellerman's press conference on the TV in the office break room. A dozen other DOD employees were there too, all of them watching in stunned silence as one of the most famous defense attorneys in America laid out his strategy. Kellerman stood at a podium outside the federal courthouse, flanked by two junior partners, looking every inch the crusader for justice. My clients, Daniel Foster and Marcus Foster, are innocent men being persecuted by a justice system that has been corrupted from within. We have evidence that the lead investigator in this case harbored a personal vendetta against the Foster family. We have evidence of investigative overreach, of manufactured testimony, of a witch hunt disguised as law enforcement. A reporter shouted a question. "Can you name the investigator you're referring to?" Kellerman paused for effect, letting the tension build. The primary investigator who spent 16 months building this fraudulent case is Margaret Foster, the sister of Daniel Foster and the mother of Marcus Foster. A woman who has spent her entire career in government obscurity, who suddenly saw an opportunity to destroy family members who had achieved the success she never could. The reporters erupted. Questions flew. Cameras flashed. Kellerman raised his hand for silence. This is not justice. This is revenge dressed up in a federal indictment, and we will prove it. We will demonstrate that every piece of evidence gathered by Ms. Foster is tainted by her personal bias. We will show that this investigation was nothing more than a family dispute weaponized through abuse of government authority. And when we're done, my clients will be exonerated, and Ms. Foster will face consequences for what she's done. He took a few more questions, each answer more damning than the last. I was portrayed as bitter, vindictive, professionally incompetent. A government bureaucrat who'd failed at life and decided to take down her more successful relatives. The woman standing next to me in the break room glanced over, did a double take when she recognized me. "Oh my God, you're Margaret Foster." I turned off the TV, walked out without responding. Back in my office, Timothy was waiting with a laptop and a grim expression. "It's trending on Twitter, Foster case. The narratives are splitting exactly how we predicted. Half the country thinks you're a hero, half thinks you're a monster. There's no middle ground." "What does the evidence say?" "That you're right, that Daniel and Marcus committed serious crimes, but evidence doesn't trend on Twitter. Emotions do." My computer pinged with a new email. Subject line, "You destroyed our family." From Marcus. I opened it, knowing I shouldn't, unable to stop myself. "Mom, I can't believe you did this. I can't believe you were the investigator. You sat across from me at lunch 3 days ago and let me talk about Uncle Daniel's case, knowing you were the one who built it, knowing you were coming for me next. Did you ever love me? Or was I always just another case filed to you? They're saying I could get 20 years. 20 years for what? For being successful, for building a business, for trusting the wrong people. You did this. You destroyed my life. You destroyed our family. And for what? A promotion, recognition, the chance to finally matter. I hope it was worth it. Don't ever contact me again. You're not my mother anymore. Marcus." I read it 3 times, each word a blade finding the spaces between my ribs. He still didn't understand, still didn't see that his success was built on crime, that his business was a front for illegal arms technology sales, that his trust in the wrong people was actually knowing participation in a conspiracy to violate federal export laws. He saw himself as a victim, not of his own choices, but of mine. I closed the email without responding. Because what could I say? That I loved him more than he'd ever know. That breaking his life apart was the hardest thing I'd ever done. That I'd rather cut off my own arm than watch him go to prison, but the law didn't care about my preferences. He wouldn't hear it, couldn't hear it. In his mind, I was the villain, and nothing I said would change that. Another email arrived, this one from my mother. Margaret, please call me. We need to understand what's happening. The news is saying terrible things. They're saying you helped arrest Daniel and Marcus. They're saying you're the one who investigated them. This can't be true. Please tell me this isn't true. Please call. Your father's heart can't take much more stress. We need to know our daughter hasn't betrayed us. Betrayed them. I'd spent 30 years trying to earn their love, their respect, their attention. I'd sacrificed my PhD, my early career opportunities, my own ambitions to be the good daughter, the supportive sister, the reliable one who never caused trouble. And now, because I'd done my job, because I'd upheld my oath, because I'd chosen country over family, I was a traitor. I typed a response. Mom, everything they're saying is true. I was the lead investigator. I built the case against Daniel and Marcus because they committed serious federal crimes. I did my job. I followed the evidence. I served my country. If you see that as betrayal, I'm sorry. But I'm not sorry for what I did. Give my love to Dad. Tell him to take care of his heart. I'll call when things settle down. Maggie. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The arraignment at 2 p.m. was closed to cameras, but open to the public, which meant the gallery was packed with reporters scribbling notes and sketch artists capturing every moment. I sat in the back row, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, trying to blend into the crowd. Sarah Whitmore sat next to me, positioned protectively, ready to run interference if anyone recognized me. The defendants were brought in separately. Daniel first, in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed, expression defiant. He scanned the courtroom, looking for allies, for family, for anyone who still believed in him. His eyes passed right over me. He didn't recognize his own sister. Marcus came in second. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the uniform and the circumstances. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by visible fear. His eyes were red. He'd been crying. He looked at the gallery, searching desperately for a familiar face. He found mine. Even with the cap and sunglasses, he knew. A mother's face is hardwired into a child's brain from infancy. You can disguise it, hide it, deny it, but on some fundamental level, they always know. Our eyes met across the courtroom. I saw the exact moment recognition turn to hatred. His face contorted, mouth opening like he was going to shout something. Kellerman grabbed his arm, whispered urgently in his ear. Marcus closed his mouth, but his eyes never left mine. The magistrate judge entered, and everyone stood. United States v. Daniel Foster and Marcus Foster. Arraignment on federal charges of violations of the International Traffic in Arms Regulations, conspiracy, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. Timothy Park stood for the prosecution, laying out the government's case in broad strokes. The technology exports, the shell companies, the $340 million in illegal transactions, the threat to national security. Kellerman stood for the defense, arguing for bail, claiming his clients were pillars of the community, not flight risks, not dangerous. The judge was having none of it. Mr. Kellerman, your clients had tickets to Dubai scheduled for next week. They have access to significant liquid assets held in offshore accounts. They have demonstrated sophisticated knowledge of international finance and clear ability to disappear. Bail is denied. Both defendants will be held pending trial. Kellerman objected strenuously. The judge overruled him. Daniel was let out first, still defiant, still certain this was all a misunderstanding that his expensive lawyers would fix. Marcus was let out second. As he passed my row, he turned his head, looked directly at me, and mouthed 2 words. "I hate you." Sarah grabbed my arm, felt me start to stand, held me in place. Don't give them the satisfaction. Stay strong." But I wasn't strong. I was breaking apart in tiny, invisible pieces, each one sharp enough to draw blood. After the arraignment, Sarah walked me to my car through a back exit to avoid the media camped out front. My security detail, 2 FBI agents named Martinez and Johnson, followed in a separate vehicle, prepared to shadow me home. The drive back to Arlington took 40 minutes through afternoon traffic. I listened to talk radio, where everyone had an opinion about the Foster case, about government overreach, about family loyalty, about what I should or shouldn't have done. One caller, a woman in her 60s, said, "I think she's a hero. She put country over family. That takes incredible courage." Another caller, a man in his 40s, said, "She's a disgrace. You don't turn on your own blood. I don't care what they did. Family is family." I turned off the radio. When I pulled onto my street, I saw what General Chen had warned me about. News vans, reporters with cameras, a small crowd of people holding signs, some supporting me, some condemning me. "Traitor to her family," one sign read. "Patriot for justice," another countered. I parked in my driveway. Martinez and Johnson positioned themselves between me and the crowd. I walked to my front door, ignoring the shouted questions, the camera flashes, the accusations and praise being hurled in equal measure. Inside, my house was exactly as I'd left it that morning. Small, quiet, safe. I locked the door, closed the blinds, and finally allowed myself to fall apart. I sank onto my kitchen floor, back against the cabinet where James and I had measured Marcus's height every birthday from age 2 to age 12. The pencil marks were still there, faded but visible. Age 5, 42 inches. Age 8, 51 inches. Age 12, 63 inches. After 12, he'd refused to be measured anymore, said it was for babies. I traced the marks with my finger and let myself cry for the first time since this entire nightmare began. Not quiet tears, but the ugly, gasping sobs of someone whose heart has finally cracked open. I cried for the little boy who'd been so excited to see his height increase. I cried for the teenager who'd hugged me at graduation and meant it. I cried for the son I'd lost somewhere along the way, replaced by a man I barely recognized. And I cried for myself, for the mother who'd loved him completely and had been forced to choose between that love and everything else she believed in. My phone rang. I ignored it. It rang again and again. Finally, I looked. General Chen. I answered, voice wrecked from crying. "Margaret, where are you?" "Home." "Are you alone?" Except for the FBI agents outside and the reporters across the street, yes. "I'm sending someone over, a counselor who works with intelligence officers dealing with operational stress. Her name is Dr. Lisa Hammond. She's cleared for everything. You can talk to her." "I don't need a therapist." "I'm not asking, Margaret. This is an order. You've just done something that would break most people. You don't have to be strong right now. You don't have to have all the answers, but you do have to let someone help you." I wanted to argue, but I was so tired, so utterly exhausted by the weight of being strong, being professional, being the woman who sacrificed everything for duty. "Okay, send her. She'll be there in an hour. And Margaret, what you did today took more courage than anything I've seen in 30 years of service. Don't let anyone, not Marcus, not the media, not anyone, make you doubt that. He hung up. I stood up, washed my face, made tea I didn't drink. Dr. Hammond arrived at exactly 6 p.m., escorted through the media circus by Martinez and Johnson. She was in her 50s, gray hair, kind eyes, the sort of calm presence that made you trust her immediately. We sat in my living room, the room with the sagging couch and the TV from 2008, and the photos of James that I'd never been able to take down. "I'm not going to ask you how you're feeling," she started. "That's a useless question. You're feeling everything and nothing. You're numb and devastated. You're certain and doubting. You're proud and ashamed. All of it is true simultaneously." I nodded, surprised by how accurately she'd named the chaos inside me. "What I am going to ask is, what do you need right now? Not what you should need. Not what would make you look strong. What do you actually need?" I thought about it, really thought about it. I need to know I did the right thing. I need to believe that choosing duty over love wasn't just cold, wasn't just me being incapable of putting family first. "Tell me about Marcus, not the defendant, the child." And so I did. I told her about the boy who'd been curious about everything, who'd asked 1,000 questions, who'd wanted to understand how the world worked. I told her about the teenager who'd struggled with math until I'd sat with him every night for a month, working through problems until it clicked. I told her about the young man who'd called me from college, homesick and scared, and I'd driven 4 hours just to take him to dinner and remind him he was capable of anything. "When did he change?" she asked quietly. "When he realized other people valued him for what he had instead of who he was. When he learned that money and status could replace substance. When he started measuring worth in dollars instead of integrity." "And when did you realize you'd lost him?" The question hit like a fist to the sternum. "The first time he laughed when someone insulted me. He was 23. We were at a family dinner. Daniel made a joke about my pathetic government salary." Marcus laughed, really laughed, like it was genuinely funny that his mother had dedicated her life to public service instead of profit. "What did you do?" "Nothing." I smiled and changed the subject. I told myself he was just trying to fit in, trying to impress his uncle. I made excuses for him. I kept making excuses for years. And now? Now I'm done making excuses. For him, for Daniel, for my parents who chose favorites and called it love. I'm done pretending that family means accepting unacceptable behavior. I'm done being invisible. Dr. Hammond smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from anyone all day. "Good, because the woman who built a case that will be taught in law schools for decades is not invisible. The woman who chose integrity over comfort is not invisible. The woman who sat in a grand jury room and testified against her own son, because it was the right thing to do, is the opposite of invisible. You're incandescent, Margaret. You're just surrounded by people who have been wearing sunglasses for so long they forgot what light looks like." Something in my chest loosened slightly, not healed but less compressed. "The trial is going to be brutal," I said. "Kellerman is going to paint me as a monster. The media is going to dissect every choice I've ever made. My family is going to testify against me if they can, and I'm going to have to sit there and take it." "Yes, and you're going to survive it, not because you're invulnerable, but because you know the truth. And eventually, the truth wins. Maybe not in the court of public opinion, maybe not in the eyes of your family, but in the only court that matters, the one where evidence speaks louder than emotion. You're going to win." We talked for another hour, about coping strategies, about setting boundaries with media, about the importance of finding moments of normal life amid chaos, about the fact that grief and certainty could coexist. When she left, I felt fractionally more human. I made dinner, pasta with jarred sauce, the same meal I'd made 1,000 times. I ate it standing at the counter, looking out at the street where reporters were finally packing up their equipment as darkness fell. My phone buzzed with a new email. Subject: Statement from Richard and Evelyn Foster. I opened it with a sense of dread. To whom it may concern. We, Richard and Evelyn Foster, parents of Margaret, Daniel, and Marcus Foster, wish to make our position clear regarding the recent arrests and allegations. We stand by our sons, Daniel and Marcus. We believe they are innocent of the charges against them. We believe this prosecution is motivated by personal animus rather than justice. We are heartbroken by our daughter Margaret's role in this matter. We raised her to value family above all else. Her actions represent a betrayal of everything we taught her. We will be supporting Daniel and Marcus throughout this ordeal, both emotionally and financially. We will not be speaking to Margaret until she acknowledges the harm she has caused and makes amends to her family. We pray that truth and justice will prevail, and our sons will be exonerated. Richard and Evelyn Foster. I read it twice, waiting to feel something. Anger, hurt, devastation. Instead, I felt relief. Because they'd finally said out loud what they'd been showing me for decades. I was the expendable child. The one whose feelings didn't matter. The one they could discard without hesitation when forced to choose. I'd spent 30 years trying to earn a place in their hearts that was never available. Now I could stop trying. I replied to the email, keeping it brief. Mom and Dad, I received your statement. I understand your position. I want you to know that I love you both. I always have. But love doesn't mean accepting illegal behavior. Love doesn't mean staying silent when people you care about commit crimes. I did my job. I followed the evidence. I upheld my oath to protect this country. If you see that as betrayal, I can't change your mind. I hope you'll reconsider your position when the full truth comes out at trial. But if you don't, I'll understand. Take care of yourselves. Margaret. I hit send and closed my laptop. Outside, the last news van pulled away. Martinez and Johnson remained stationed in an unmarked car across the street, my silent guardians against a world that couldn't decide if I was hero or villain. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, changed into James's old MIT sweatshirt that I'd kept for 8 years, and got into bed. On my nightstand, his photo smiled at me through the darkness. I did it, James. I chose right over easy, just like you taught me. In the quiet of the room, I could almost hear his voice. I never doubted you for a second, Maggie, not 1 second. I turned off the light and closed my eyes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more media, more statements, more hatred from strangers and loved ones alike. But tonight, alone in my small house with my small life and my enormous choice, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness, not victory, not vindication. Just the quiet peace that comes from knowing you did what you had to do, cost be damned. And for now, that was enough.